I hear the bells ringing here at St. Andrews at 7 o'clock. The front lawn is packed with spike ball players and frisbee throwers and square. What's that game? Square.
Foursquare.
Foursquare players. Yeah. So busy night on the lawn. I think it's going to be 80 degrees tomorrow. So I know the kids are clamoring for a free day.
Ooh.
Pretty unlikely, I'd say, with the long weekend coming up. I don't want to smash their dreams, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Good point.
You never know. Never know. Well, the bells just struck 7, so I guess we'll get started. We'll be prompt and get started.
All right, a win for girls soccer.
Nice.
That's good news.
Nice. Thanks to Marie's mom for sharing that. Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to have you all here with us tonight. This is sort of the unofficial kickoff of the college counseling process. And I didn't think this day would ever come, but I'm also one of you. I'm a parent of a member of the class of 24. I'm not sure if my wife's in the audience. If a random question comes in about why don't you communicate more, I'll know it's probably from her. But we're happy to have you here. Probably many of you I've met over the course of the last couple of years, but I'm Jason Hansel. My wife Kristen and I both work here. Our daughter Zoe is in the class of 24. And do college counseling here, obviously, and then also coach girls basketball and help out in the Baum dorm, which is sophomore boys. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to let my colleagues and our team introduce themselves as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Hastings, obviously in the college office here at St. Andrews. I'm also a member of the English department and teach 16 of your children in a section of English 2, which is the 10th grade English class. I serve too as an academic advisor to half of the senior class, and I do dorm duty in Pell, which is the dorm for the third form girls. So I know many, if you have a daughter, I probably know her in some capacity from having them in the dorm last year. So anyway, it's great. It's great to be here tonight. My husband and I live on campus. He doesn't work here with our 2 much younger than sophomore children. They're in kindergarten and preschool.
So we have 2 other team members here tonight, and I'm not sure if they can show themselves on the screen, but I will introduce them, and maybe if they can pop on, great. If not, one is Cheryl Rojas, who is the office manager, and you all will get to know Cheryl during the course of your work with the college office. She's sort of the engine behind that makes us run, handling issues surrounding transcripts, and just an essential part of our team. And yeah, Cheryl's amazing, and we're so grateful to have her here with us at St. Andrews in the college office. And then the newest member of our team is Dr. Martha Pitts. Dr. Pitts is also new to St. Andrews this year. She teaches in the English department. She is also a parent of the class of 24. Her daughter Olivia is in this class, and she's been with us, working with us this year, sort of quietly, but she's going to be joining the team next year and working with some of the students as well. So we're excited to have Dr. Pitts with us as part of the team. She's logged in as a parent, so she cannot be seen tonight, but we look forward to you meeting her through the course of this process. So I'm going to let Anna start it off and talk a little bit about, one of the first questions we often get from sophomore parents is, what should we be doing now? And in particular, what are some ideas for this coming summer? Are there things we should be thinking about or having our child do before we get to the junior year and officially kick off the process?
Yeah, and so to address that question of kind of what to think about now and also what to think about this summer. I mean, I think our biggest answer, our main answer is first and foremost to have what I would call a productive summer, which can look like a lot of different things. That can mean getting a summer job, and it doesn't have to be a fancy one. Some students think if they're not working in a top lab in New York City, then it's not worthwhile. And the answer is no. Any kind of summer job is worthwhile. It can mean volunteering. It can mean, setting up your own business and mowing lawns in your neighborhood. And there are a lot of different things that it can look like when it comes to working, but we really say, that's a good thing to do. We also think, if you're an athlete and sports are important to you, then, taking time to pursue that passion and work on improving, especially if you think maybe that's a goal of yours for college, it can be good to do some work on your sports, to go to some sports camps. Maybe you're a student. I know of a couple in this class who love their summer camps, and they have an opportunity to be a counselor in training. That's wonderful. It's a great leadership experience. It's a great way to give back to an organization that you love. So there are a whole bunch of different things that we think are kind of great ways to spend a summer. And they don't have to, I think this is something we think is really important. They don't have to cost a lot of money or be very, kind of exotic or, new and different. And so I think sometimes kids or parents think if they're not traveling to a far off land or, again, getting an internship at a Wall Street firm, that somehow it's not a worthwhile summer. And we're here to assure you that it very much is. I should also say we really believe in things like spending time with your family, reading, spending time outdoors and taking time to recharge in between, 2 really busy years of life at St. Andrews. I think one other thing we think is a great thing to do is, if you are taking a drive somewhere as a family, or you're going to be in a part of the country that you aren't otherwise in, and there's a college or two around, it can be great to get your feet onto a campus or two. Not really necessarily thinking about the particular name of the school, but is it an urban school? Is it a rural school? Is it a big state school? Is it a tech school like an MIT? And kind of very casually starting to explore what happens to be out there can be a great way to spend a small part of the summer too.
I would also add, if your students have questions, particularly around like athletics and recruiting, or something really specific, we're always happy to meet with them. In fact, I'm meeting with a sophomore student tomorrow who's interested in the recruiting process and wants to sort of, have some questions about that. So we are always available to meet with students and talk to families if there are questions that come up before next year when we more formally start the process. And the other big question we often get is around this idea of SAT, ACT prep, right? So that this is a big question mark. And, one of the things that's really changed in our landscape and our world is that schools, most schools have gone test optional. Of course, we just probably saw in the news, MIT is now going back to requiring tests. But for the most part, what we're seeing is the highly selective colleges where our students tend to apply are remaining test optional. And it's been the challenge to it is it's really increased application numbers across the board. So colleges are receiving record numbers of applications. And we think obviously the test optional piece is the reason behind that. But for our students, we've seen some incredible results from kids who normally may not have gotten into a highly selective school, but because they were able to apply test optional, they did these last 2 years. So we know that's always an option for students. It appears to be an option for the class of certainly 23, and it looks like for 24. We shouldn't assume that, but I think we at least know that that's a really strong possibility for students. So it takes a little of the pressure off. In terms of when to do test prep, it really depends, right? So we usually talk about if you have a student, if your child is a just naturally gifted test taker, certainly was not me, but you can, the students who just kind of without any test prep took the SSAT and just did really well. And you have a student who's really motivated, who says to you, I would actually love to get the SAT or ACT started early. That would be a student that we could recommend. Yeah, maybe this summer is not a bad time to start that test prep process. However, I would say for most of our students, it's too early, right? All the data shows that SAT, ACT results are stronger when they're taken later in the student's high school career. So late in the junior year, early in the senior year, or often when students get the best results. And so we often encourage students to wait until next year into next summer before they really take on intensive test prep. the challenge of doing test prep during the course of the school year, as I'm sure you hear from your children, this is a very busy place. There isn't a lot of free time or free moments to work in test prep. In fact, often you have to use Sundays, which, you know, is really the one true sort of day of rest here at St. Andrews. So we're not huge fans of doing test prep during the course of the school year. But again, some students can manage that. If they're really good balancing their time, they can find that time during the school year. But we're hopeful that test optional remain very viable for most of our students, and maybe take a little of the pressure off of doing serious, intense test prep throughout the course of the next year into the summer. So we're certainly, we'll answer more questions about that. I see some popping into the screen, but yeah, so we really, if you have questions that are specific to your child, we certainly can answer them one-on-one anytime, right? And I don't know if you'd add to that SAT, ACT stuff.
But I think the only detail I would add to that is if your student is a pretty strong math student, they're in, I would say, honors pre-calculus or above, then doing some test prep could also make sense. But if they haven't yet done the math that's on the ACT or the SAT, or maybe they've completed the course, but they've had to work pretty hard to perform well, then it may also make sense to delay a bit until they've got a more solid math foundation. It's a bit, if you haven't done all the math that's on the test, then preparing for it doesn't entirely make sense, because you're learning the math as you're learning the strategies. So I think that's just one other small thing to kind of keep in mind along the way.
And the last piece I'd add to that is, you know, students or families often ask, which is the better test for me? And, you know, we think the only real way to tell that is taking an actual practice test. And as you know, the students did take it as sophomores earlier this year in October. We certainly, the test prep companies are, as you can imagine, given the test optional policies, are being very generous. So we can certainly, you know, give the student, or the student can go online and take a mock ACT. It's very easy to do. They're free. School prep companies will do that for you and grade that. Again, I think what may be nice is to wait till junior year and do the PSAT. We've traditionally offered one for juniors for ACT, so that they can compare the two around the same time. But again, it just depends on if you're on the fast track, you can do that this spring. I think a ball just hit my window from the front lawn. So,
oh gosh. I think the next thing we were going to talk about are some good conversations to have with your students this summer, that I would say can be good conversations to have as they enter their junior year at St. Andrews, and as they begin to think about kind of life after St. Andrews, which is what we obviously work on with them. I think one of the things that I tend to harp on a lot with the students that I work with, but I think it's really important, is financial aid. And I think if you don't know yet if you will need financial aid, then this summer is a great time to start crunching some numbers, and then to also talk with your child about that and what that reality might look like for them. And I know those conversations can be tricky. Lots of us are not comfortable talking about money in general, but having some discussions about it and kind of exploring what it might mean for you and for your student, I think is really important. There are some great websites out there where you can do some preliminary estimates at a range of colleges. My favorite is called My Intuition. And I think they have about 70 schools that are on it, public and private, where you can, in under 10 minutes, have entered your financial information and get a range of estimates for what the cost might look like. And I think, again, this is a really important and really good thing, especially if it's your first child and you haven't been through this yet, to run some of those numbers so that you can have good discussions before the process even begins. I think sometimes many of us are wishful thinkers that it's all going to magically happen. And sometimes it does, but you know, more often than not, we need to be practical and pragmatic about this sort of thing. So that can be a really good thing to discuss with your student leading into the junior year.
Another really good conversation is we try to have, and I know, probably to varying success with our kids, but, really asking them to think about what has been value about what they've enjoyed the most about their St. Andrews experience. What classes have they enjoyed? What teachers have they connected with the most? What extracurricular activities are really exciting them? Much like the boarding school process. And again, some of you maybe did some similar to what a college search would look like. You looked at different schools, you visited boarding schools, you look for that right fit for your child. In many ways, the college process is similar, and getting them to think about what's important to them and what kinds of qualities they're looking for in a college is helpful. So when we start our official process with this class, it'll be before classes start next August or early September, and we'll talk to them about these kinds of conversations, and then have them start to meet with college representatives next fall. So we'll have about 50 to 80 colleges come visit us in the fall, either in person or Zoom, depending on what's going on in the world at the time. And it's a great opportunity for our students to begin learning about what's out there, what kind of college opportunities there are, and really kick the process off that way. And then we will begin our individual meetings with the students in November/December. So that's when we start those individual meetings and really work closely with the students and parents beginning then. So we really wanted to keep this relatively short and just kind of give you a quick introduction and preview. And then we're hopeful that you might have some questions for us. If there are any things that we went over too quickly or things we didn't mention that might be helpful. So if you want to throw those questions in the chat or in the Q&A, we will read them out and then answer them. So, all right. So first question, this is a good one. What percentage of the 2022 class did not submit test scores? We have heard that for private school students that they should be submitting scores if not, they are at a disadvantage. Okay. So that's the question. It's typically about, somewhere in the range of 10 to 20% of our students will be test optional. That's been the last 2 years, obviously. And the exciting thing is they got into the most selective schools. So we had students get into Brown, Penn, last year, Williams, and the small college side. And Anna, jump in if you can recall some others who were test optional. Duke. So Vanderbilt. So these are really highly selective schools who admitted our students from private school. And these weren't students necessarily that had any other special recruit athlete tags or other things like that. So I too was very skeptical at first. I must confess, I was sort of like, what, everyone should have test scores. It's, we're going to need them. And I've been pleasantly surprised that, and one of the things we do is we have conversations with our colleagues who are college admissions officers, and we very candidly ask those questions. And I had just talked to a colleague from UPenn about 2 weeks ago, and I trust her, and she was like, absolutely not. She's like, we read these kids the same way as if they had scores, if they don't. So I really feel, while skeptical last year, I actually believe that our kids can be fine without test scores. So.
The next question is there a way to find out what grants or other scholarship options might be available to students, or does it depend on which schools they're applying to? And the answer is, yeah, it sort of does depend on the schools that they're applying to. There are outside scholarships out there that students can pursue. You may have heard of the Gates Foundation or the Coca-Cola scholarships. There are a few other kind of big ones. They tend to be really, really hard to get. And so we tend to advise students to, if need is a factor in their college process, to look at schools that are generous with financial aid. And we, again, sort of work with them on that. And we tend to know where we've seen students get good financial aid. If merit scholarships are something that might need to be a consideration, so those are not based on need, then we also have sort of developed, some knowledge over the years about where students might want to look. And certainly we encourage, if financial need is a factor, we encourage any student with that in mind to consider their home public state universities as well. at least the sticker price there is going to be lower than at a private school. Whether or not it ends up being cheaper is often a question mark, but the price up front is often going to be the lowest.
Good question. How often will you be meeting with our students? So once the students are assigned a counselor, and I think this is another question, when the students get assigned. So we usually assign the counselors, the students a counselor next fall. And how we do it is both deliberate and random at the same time. And we try to match students. We try to balance students in terms of like, different types of students off of different interests, different grade GPAs. And, but we also think about if Anna has taught a group of students and has gotten to know them well, there's a good chance she might work with some of those students. If I've coached them with basketball or have gotten to know them, better on the dorm, I might work with some of those students. So we try to match them that way as well. So, but that will be next year. We'll do that matching process. And, and I would also add that we've worked very collaboratively. So, as an office, we're in each other's offices a lot. I mean, probably, I'm in Anna's office and she's in my office like more often than we're by ourselves. So, and Martha's office will be at Dr. Pitts' office will be down here as well. So we'll all be kind of collaborating very carefully or closely to work on all the students together. Yeah.
And I think I'll go with how often do we meet with students? Early in the process, it's probably more like once a month. And then as the ball really gets rolling closer to the end of junior year, and certainly in senior year, in the fall of senior year, I'm sometimes seeing students once a week or more, depending on what we're working on, how close we are to a deadline. Certainly we are available to kids, when they need us. We respond to emails over the summer. We read essays over the summer before senior year. I know I have definitely Zoomed with students in July. So, we're a pretty hands-on office if a student needs us. I tend to find most kids in the summer take a break from their college counselor, however. So anyway, to answer a question about service academies, any advice? I think what's really smart if you're thinking about West Point, Navy, Air Force is if you can get on a campus to see it, that can be really helpful. Depending upon obviously where you live. Navy is only an hour from here, so it's not super far from St. Andrews campus. I encourage students who might be thinking about that to do their research and do their homework and know what's entailed. And then I think the other thing that I, tell them to do is once you've done that, you hopefully know what the physical fitness test is and can pass that. And so you might want to train for that. The academies, I believe, have gone back to requiring testing. Jason, I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yes, I think they have. And then the other thing they have is they do have pre-summer programs that sort of like a trial basis you can apply for and spend, I think it's, I don't remember, a week. And they kind of put you through, here's what a typical week would look like. And if you come to the academy. So it's a really good experience to see if it's something the student might be interested in. We have had, I think we've had three students in the last 2 years attend one of the academies, or four actually. So.
Yep. Those summer program students can usually apply in the winter of their junior year for the summer prior to senior year. And I find that students who are able to do one, it kind of makes a big difference in terms of them deciding one way or the other if it's an option. And certainly we're happy to help connect them with our alums who are attending those institutions too. I know they're always excited to talk to students who might be thinking about that.
All right, I'm going to jump back and forth. So does a website exist that is a link to the schools that offer test optional applications for 2024? One of the websites we often refer to is a one called College Kickstart. It's a service that students and schools can use, but they often have really good in their blog posts. They often have really good information about things like which colleges offer merit scholarships or which colleges will be test optional in 2024. So that's a really good resource. I don't know if we can send that out to you all sometime this week as well, if you can't remember, but it's College Kickstart. One word is Kickstart. If you Google that, that's a really good website to get that type of information. But again, what we've seen and heard from a lot of our schools where we do a lot of business is a lot of schools will be test optional in 2024. We suspect, in addition to MIT, I wouldn't be surprised if other STEM heavy schools like Carnegie Mellon and places like that also go back to requiring testing. But I think the liberal arts colleges are here to stay with test optional, and other highly selectives. I would not be surprised if they also remain. So
Yeah.
real quickly, can you share your thinking about early decision, early action as a strategy? So we will talk a lot about this next year, but let me I'll quickly just mention that early decision is a binding agreement where a student applies earlier in the process. Typically November is the deadline, and they find out in December if offered admission, the student is expected to attend. That is a strategy that our students use a lot. I would say, somewhere in the range of around two thirds of the students will apply early decision. It's, it does move the process up a little faster, but it is a significant statistical advantage for the admissions process. So it's definitely a process that we are very open and comfortable talking with our students. And so it's a pretty common strategy for our students.
Great. And Jason, did you mention what early action is as well? Early action, for those of you who might not be aware, is when a student applies early, same thing, typically in November, they'll get news of whether or not they're admitted from that college earlier, sometimes in December, sometimes in January or February, depending on the institution. And if they're admitted, they do not have to enroll. They have until May 1st to make up their mind. And we tend to encourage students, if they have a school that we would say is sort of a possible or a target school, or a school that they're highly likely to get into that has early action, we tend to encourage them to do that, because again, if they're admitted, they don't have to make a decision about going. There are also, we have become very aware of a number of public universities that if you don't apply early action, then your chances of getting in really drop significantly. So if a student, again, happens to be from one of those states and that's their home university, we'll really push them to do that application early as well. So that's something that I think is pretty common in our office. There's a question here about how do students manage the submissions of applications with their workload at school? What's the role of parents, and how do we provide support? So that's a big question. I think we do really urge students to do as much as they can between junior and senior year when it comes to application work. And certainly we encourage them to at least do the applications that they might be submitting early. So those ones that might be coming in November, if they've got drafts of those when they come back in the fall of their senior year, they'll be in good shape. And actually, we were looking over some surveys from some seniors from a few years ago. And one of the questions was, do you have any kind of advice for us? And I think 10 students said, tell the younger students to get their applications done over the summer. So we push that and encourage that. And I think the students who do that find the fall to be pretty manageable. We also, we're doing course selection right now with students and helping them figure out what they're taking senior year. And I know I have a conversation with every student about, is this set of classes that you're picking going to be a good balance for what you're going to be juggling in the fall of your senior year? So we do have those kinds of conversations with kids as well, to kind of try to make sure they're maintaining balance and a good pace. But it is a busy time, and I think that kind of they're ready for it by the time they get to it too. And I think as parents, that it's going to be a busy time, and you may get a stressed phone call once or twice, but they're going to be able to do it, and it's going to be okay. And that's also, it's all okay. It's going to be good. Jason, you're muted.
How about, there we go. I was just going to say that in addition, just to follow up on Anna's comments, we work very closely with the students. We're very hands-on. I'm not going to lie. There are some nights on October 31st, the night before the deadline, and there's a student at my house and we're hitting send at 10 p.m. Little close for comfort, but we work very closely and help guide students. And again, every student's different. Some students will be really diligent and get all their work done in the summer. Others will be that late night, night of that it's due. And we understand that everyone's different. And, there's a part of us that would love everyone to do it in the summer, but we also understand that we can't expect everyone's going to do that. But we'll encourage it for sure. A couple questions over here on the chat side. One of the questions is what percentage of seniors attend college? And that's almost always 100%. And our students really do focus on, it's so funny when you think about getting into college, everyone's like, oh my God, it's so hard to get in college. And the truth is it's not. It's just hard to get into a very small sliver of colleges. It happens to be where a lot of our students want to go to college, but we really, our students all get into colleges. They all have choices, and we help them with that and guide that process. And the other piece about scholarships, I do think there's a little bit of an urban legend about there's all this scholarship money out there. It's just waiting to be taken. And, the truth is, our best resource for scholarships is often the colleges themselves. Like they tend to have the most and the best aid available for students and families. And actually, if you do get an outside scholarship, the college will take away from your financial aid. So getting outside scholarships isn't always sort of as lucrative as you might think it would be. But we certainly will help students with that as well. Cheryl's a great resource for us. She'll send the student scholarships, especially if they're specific to Delaware or whatever state the student's from. So she will keep students and families updated on that. We had another question, I think 2 questions about the platform we use. So most high schools and independent schools use one of several platforms which help guide the students. They basically store all of our data. They help us manage the applications. We used to use a program called Naviance. We now use one called Score, which is a great product, which helps us, again, gives us graphing information and data. So if a student asks us, well, what are my chances at a school like Duke? We can show them the historical data from St. Andrews so that they can get a sense of what the competitiveness would be at a place like that. So.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. We have a couple of questions coming up in the Q&A that are related to courses. I'll take on the AP questions first. I mean, as many of you might know, we're not an AP school, so we don't offer AP classes here. We have a level of course that your students will be encountering as juniors and seniors called AS, which stands for Advanced Study. And in terms of rigor, it's very much like an AP course, if not more rigorous. And we describe those as college level. And so students who are taking advanced study courses are taking some of our most rigorous classes here at St. Andrews. Someone else asked about, do students take AP tests here? And the answer to that is yes, they do. And we offer them in May. Because we don't offer AP courses, our curriculum often doesn't line up with those examinations. There are some exceptions with calculus and some of our higher level science classes and upper level language courses. So all classes that most students here, if they run into them, are running into them senior year, maybe occasionally in the junior year. If a student wants to take an AP test outside of those, they certainly could prepare for it on their own and do so. But we really try to talk to students about the balance, the work-life balance a lot. And, having a 5 on an AP test in a subject that's, like human geography is nice, but not if it comes at the expense of doing well in your courses. Your transcript is going to matter ultimately a lot more than the AP scores will. And we can both tell you stories, but about wonderful kids who have gotten into the most selective schools from St. Andrews having taken 1 or 0 AP tests. I think the colleges know that we are not aligned with that curriculum and that there are great reasons for why we're not, and so that it's not as important. Now, the only caveat to that is if you and your student might want to be considering school outside of the United States, in the UK or in Europe, then it may make sense for them to start thinking, and this could be a good maybe a good conversation for them to have with one of us even before the summer, but about what are they taking next year and what might align with an AP test in case that's something they might want to do. Again, places in the UK, occasionally Canada and Europe are the ones that tend to want AP testing. You're muted again, Jason.
Can't get a break here. All right. All right. So good question about kind of the state of college admissions and, you know, what happened this year and what the expectations are for next year. And, you know, as maybe I mentioned, or you've probably read, you know, colleges, particularly selected colleges, are breaking numbers of applications. And I think a big part of that has been the test optional. It's given the green light for a lot of kids who normally wouldn't apply to that college to apply. And where they've especially seen that growth is in their international pool. So their international numbers, I just read this at Yale, I think it's grown like 100% in the last 2 years. So a lot of that growth is coming from international students in terms of those application numbers, but certainly, you know, we've seen some significant growth at highly selective schools. And so we have seen that. It's a good thought-provoking question. What do we think about next year? Feels like things might settle back down a little bit, but you know, the good news is our students are really well prepared. They put together great applications, and we've had great results this year. In the last 2 years, really, we've really had really good results. And I think, you know, we feel good about how our students go through this process. You know, our job in many ways is to make sure they get everything in on time, and, you know, they put together great essays, great applications. Obviously, we don't have control of what happens, but and we're also trying to sort of make this process, you know, not drive their St. Andrews experience. And again, why we start now, our junior year, not earlier, is because we don't want this process to sort of define who they are and everything about their St. Andrews experience. So we really try to emphasize that as we go through this. But yeah, so far so good. We've had a really good couple years. We're hopefully that momentum will continue, and you know, we're optimistic about the future. So,
another question about coursework, and this is a quick one. What's the foreign language requirement at selective colleges, universities? Is it level 4 or 4 years of the same language during high school? I think honestly, it depends on the kid and the school. And also what they want to study. If they're passionate about doing something with the word international in the title, then they should go as far as they can with language. If they might be a STEM kid and they complete their requirement at St. Andrews, which is actually through level 3, and they want to pick up another science because they're STEMmy, then that can also be okay. But most colleges, if they say 4, then well, it's tricky. Some of them want 4 years, and some of them would prefer through level 4, which might not actually be 4 years. It might be 3 if your student entered high school in level 2. So the answer is yes, both. It could be either one. But again, I think it's very kid by kid to some extent. Sort of related to that, how is St. Andrews doing with admissions to the STEM schools? Any recommendations on courses that are needed if applying to engineering? I would say we're doing great. We have kids who have gotten into some great engineering programs. We had an MIT admit this year. Rose-Hulman, which is a very specific engineering school in the Midwest, and really excellent option. And I think the biggest recommendations we can give to students is they've got to do as well as they can do in their math and science courses. Ideally, come senior year, they're in an advanced calculus course and are taking advanced physics or advanced chemistry, or both. I think the other thing that's becoming clearer with some of these schools is that they want to see students who are involved in STEM-related non-academic activities, sometimes in ways that are a little problematic, to be quite honest. Jason and I will sometimes talk about how we don't think it's necessarily fair that colleges want like fully formed adults entering in, but they may want to see that a student has volunteered or tried to shadow, or they're in the robotics club, that they're doing things that are related to what they're saying they're passionate about in a STEM field. And so that can be something good to look into for the summer between junior and senior year in particular.
Well, these have been great questions. We have one more here, it looks like, and we will answer that one, but appreciate your attendance and great questions tonight. So the last one is, who writes letters of recommendation? And it's a great question. I mean, this is something we take really a lot of pride in. So there are always 2 teacher letters of recommendations. The students will meet with the students and will consult with them, and then have the students ask 2 teachers from their junior year, ideally one from the STEM side, math or science, one from the humanities side, English, history, or language. And then our teachers do a wonderful job of writing those letters. They're very specific, very detailed, and they all come through our office, and we get to read them too. And then we send them out for the students. So once the student asks their teachers, we take care of sort of the rest of the process for them. And then the college counselors write one as well. And this is one, again, I think we take great pride in. And we sort of see this as the student's narrative and all their great qualities sort of shining in this story that we tell. And again, one of the advantages of St. Andrews is we get to know the kids really well through our work in the dorms, in the dining hall, having sit down meals with them, coaching them, and obviously being their college counselors. So it's a point of great pride for us. And we do get a lot of good feedback about the writing that our faculty and that our counselors do to really highlight the strengths of our students. So we feel great about that. We will get to know you well, we promise. And then next year, a lot more details will come out and you'll start to see more data. But really grateful again for your attendance tonight. I can't believe I'm one of you. And no, I will not be my daughter's college counselor, as you can imagine. Anna Hastings probably will. But probably will be with Dr. Pitts' daughter too. So she's the big winner. But appreciate you all being here tonight and look forward to seeing you all in person soon.
Thanks everyone for coming.